A bit about kind of frozen flavor, but kind of done in a bit more of a storytelling. I know you just met me, but just to refresh you of all the amazing things I've achieved. But you know, I was unfairly lost a big award to Dan this year as well. So you know these things, but I guess Panda and Sons is the most well-known bar of ours. You know, I'm not going to go too deep into that, but Hoot the Redeemer was actually the catalyst for what we're going to talk about. So lucid dreams, you know, when you wake up in the middle of the night and you have a really clear idea of your dream, you fall back asleep and then you can't quite remember it when you wake up. Well, my friend taught me you could teach yourself to write it down when you have it on the side of your bed, a notepad. And it's a really fun experiment because you can write in a language that doesn't exist, which is really fun, but sometimes you have really good ideas. It's really good, especially if you have like creative block. And I had a really big dream about like the film Big with Tom Hanks. So it's kind of in a fun fair, but everything was twisted into an adult version. So the ice cream had alcohol in it, boozy slushies, the claw crane machine was playing for cocktails. So I was like, cool, I'm going to run with that. And then Nauticus is our kind of Scottish pub, all about Scottish produce. But going back to Hoot the Redeemer being the catalyst, so I love ice cream. You know, my dad was in an ice cream business when I was really small. But, you know, I could watch a YouTube video and follow things, but I wouldn't necessarily understand why I'm doing the certain steps. So I went to University of Reading, study science of ice cream, and then you have your Italian friends telling you gelato is very different, right? It's different. Yeah, exactly. So I didn't really believe that. I was quite naive. So then I went to Gelato University, which is a thing in Bologna, Italy. So overqualified gelato lover. But the great thing about this was it was actually, I came into the bartender's brain and actually realizing that freezing is not just freeze your food, you know, keep it stored. I was actually realizing there's a lot more to do with flavor. So that was back in 2014, and that's when the wheels started to go in motion and thinking about this. Yeah, so don't look about this, but like I wanted to focus on this as well. It's kind of touching on more dualism. So Panda and Sons is really kind of like old school feel. I guess kind of pubby, lots of tweed, lots of wood features, but I guess in our cocktails are very kind of contrasting in style of this as well. So we'll talk about that in a second. But again, this is not me saying stop cooking. This is not an anti-cooking thing. Like, I'm not telling you guys to change what you're doing, but what I'm hoping by the end of this session is you guys are going to really see maybe there's more of a flavor option, flavor pathway. Maybe cooking will be the better option for that cocktail, maybe freezing will. So rather than just having the same route and doing that, maybe we can have a better pathway to really get that perfect flavor for that perfect cocktail. But yeah, so I guess history. So we're not going to go straight into the techniques as well. So has anyone got a pineapple tattoo here? Exactly, sign of like the ultimate hospitality, right? But so is ice. Like actually places like Canada, Alaska, Scandinavia were massive exporters of ice. There was a massive industry before there was electricity. It was this weird thinking about ships full of ice, traveling all the way around the world. And just like, even now, this is easy. You've got a freezer, it makes ice. But yeah, even then, before inflation, just back a long, long time ago, it was $1 billion industry. So think how big that is now. And even this over here on your left, there's an ice house in Iran. So think about that, super hot country. Yeah, they're able to get ice shipped all the way there and stored, which I think is really amazing. And again, it's really good use of harnessing nature. And actually, if you walk to the top of Scotland, all the way to the bottom of England, you can go basically via every single private estate throughout the whole place. And actually, every estate, so I went to Scotland, so you've got loads of beautiful estates, lords, earls, and they've always got these weird things, you know. And for a long time, I'm like, what are these buildings? But actually, they're ice houses. So obviously, the rich had the luxury of having these things. And then what they'd have here is the luxury of like, so they go really deep underground and they layer like hay, ice, and obviously using the nature of soil to keep it really cold. And actually, even in London a few years ago, they found when they were doing some refurbishments, a 200-meter wide, 200-meter deep ice house. So just like it shows this as a massive business back in the day. But if you look at our relationship, I think one thing's a really good thing to point out is like, I think the guessing analogy, if you're constantly looking at the best chefs, the best restaurants, which is great, it's awesome, you know, we're learning so much from them, but we're not going to get anything about freezing because, you know, take away ice cream, gelato. I had a really weird frozen Siberian raw fish when I was over in Russia a few years ago, but there's not a lot we can do, really. So if we keep looking at that direction, we're not going to learn anything about freezing. And I guess also the other relationship it's hot. The rich have ice to cool down in their drinks. But there's nothing to do with flavor. And that's what I realized, because actually solids food, there's not a lot we can do with flavor, but for liquids, there is. So actually, I see freezing as a real opportunity for us to really adopt that and create more techniques, because I think the bridge between the top restaurants, top bars is closing, but the kitchen got a massive head start. We need food to survive. Thousands of years of developing techniques, whereas we've got very few techniques. I can probably name them with 2 hands maximum how many techniques we've got. So I think here lends itself to be creating more techniques and really make it so we can bridge that gap even more. So I think also people always tell you, what's the difference between a new technique? And it's quite a hard question, but for example, when we're cooking at home, you bring to a boil and simmer. Try and explaining that to a 5-year-old what the difference is between boiling and simmering. It's very hard to explain that. It's boiling. They're both boiling. It's just water. But we know when we're cooking that small difference is going to make a massive difference to our food. And I think that's it. Any small aspect we approach differently will affect the flavor. And I guess right now we're looking at a very linear approach to it, like 0 to 100 based on water. But if you look at it now, we should be more of a kind of spectrum. And I think the best way to think about it is, I love a cooked strawberry, but it's very different to a fresh strawberry. And actually, by using freezing, we can maintain the fresh flavors because we're not burning off the delicate flavors, the acids, etc. So we can preserve that. And actually, I think it's getting really hard to find new ingredients for your cocktails. Everyone's really gone into the really deep indigenous plants, herbs, which is really cool. But again, the more people are doing it, it's harder to find something new. But I think by developing more things with a more technique approach, we can develop more flavor profiles that even for things that we find overdone, boring, apple, strawberry. Here we can actually pull out different flavor notes from that by using freezing techniques. And you don't have to be a scientist. I think thankfully we're all high caliber here. Probably been bartending for more than 6 months, right? Yeah. So we know what's going to kill us, what's not. We've done cocktails, cocktail comps, cocktail menus. It's just about just going for it and having fun. And I think one thing we take away from this is just knowledge sharing. I think that's what's been so good the past few days of all of us, just talking about what we do, our bars, and just sharing that. And I think that needs to be more and more prevalent in our industry. Shuhari is the kind of process we follow in the bar. So we always understand what exists. And that's how we kind of really started. So what we were doing first was really understanding freeze concentration, which I'll talk about after this, which is like an OG technique. And so we really went into that and really wanted to understand it. And then once we started reading the theory, we went into practical stuff. And then finally, because we understood everything, we're able to detach, evolve the technique into this sense as well. So it's very cliched. It's very much walk before you can run, but you can run so much faster. That's where we're able now to really churn out. So as I said, 2014, there wasn't much activity, but now we're getting really accelerated in terms of what we're doing now. So it's a good one to do. And then dualism as well, touching on that. So, I guess like this, what I'm wearing today, and also you go to Panda and Sons, we're wearing these kind of aprons. So it's very much like a clash of styles, but we believe it actually works really well in terms of what we're doing as well. But then that's the thing. And then if you look at our interiors as well, so you look at our labs, this is the main, we've actually got 2. So this is our main kind of creative space, but we've designed it I think, Rotovap, Sensory, super cool things if they fit, but it doesn't fit what we're trying to achieve. We're trying to achieve more and more of learning about flavor. So we really developed it. So you've got freeze dryers. This looks like a normal freezer, but it's a super freezer, goes to -45, blast freezer, frozen plates, vacuum blenders, gelatin machine behind the picture, loads of stuff. So we've really developed loads of equipment that we know we can pursue and develop more and more and learn more about it. But as you can see, there's a table in the middle. And this is really significant for us because I think I'm going to tell you a lot of information today. We're probably still digesting our food from lunch, a little bit semi-tired. It's been a great day, but long. But here, I know I absorb information a lot more when it's practical, when you're actually doing it. And I think people's brains work very differently. So even a couple of years ago, I was doing a really immersive training, and actually in Finland. So it was all about ice, cold. But this guy, Aaron from Kink, was asking me questions I'd not thought about before. And I was like, this guy is thinking differently. So we got him over to come. We planned it, had a few days, and he was like, I want to try this with switching, suppression, this, boom, boom. We went through everything, and then now he's taking a completely different direction. So again, he's done the Shuhari. He learned what exists from the freeze concentration from me, and now he's detaching. But yeah, so again, really clash of styles. But again, it kind of touches on the fact that we've got great drinks. Of course, there's some geeks that want to learn about the techniques, but actually the majority of the people that come in don't care about what I'm talking about today. They just want delicious drinks. So that's why this dualism works really well, because on the end of the day, it's just a really nice cocktail. Yeah, so let's go into techniques now. So freeze concentration. That's not ours, but it's like the OG one. So it's also, freeze distillation is also freeze concentration, cryo concentration. In a nutshell, you've got, say, you freeze, say, apple juice, and then you freeze off large amounts of water, and then what's left is a more concentrated form of the apple juice. Because usually when you freeze the water out, the acids, sugars, etc. increase, so you get more flavor. There's two kind of main ways of doing it. These two, so the top one is basically when you just get like a normal, for example, got your wine cooler, fill that up with apple juice, just chuck it in the freezer, and you freeze it fully, so it's rock solid. And then what you do, say it's 4 liters, then you put it in the fridge and you do a controlled melt. And then here you can kind of follow that kind of heads, hearts, and tails. Similar distillation, so the first liter will be super concentrated. The second, third liter will be kind of like apple juice, and then the last liter will be very watery, because the way to think about it is the first thing to freeze is water, the last thing to melt is water. So you can control it this way, either by volume or by timing it, and this is the best way. We don't do this way, just primarily because when you freeze, say, juices fully, it's basically freeze pasteurizing it, because you're breaking the cells, and so you're losing some flavor. So this is why we follow the directional freezing methods. So we're kind of using these cool boxes here. It's kind of like 4 or 5 liters in size. And again, we're kind of keeping the lid off. So I guess maybe some people are still doing this, but I remember like 10 years ago making block ice for a bar, which was really annoying. But yeah, that's how we did it, the same way. And that means by doing this, we're kind of freezing from the top down and always leaving this kind of liquid in the bottom. And that's what we're kind of keeping the head, I guess, in that principle as well. And it's a really fun way to do it. You can do it with anything. Obviously, we're doing juices, but you can do wines, beers, fortified wines, tequila, Patrón, everything, so there's anything you can do. But yeah, I guess, like, what's the main component of fruit?
Water. Sugar.
Water, yeah, exactly. Close, but yeah, that's a main part as well. But yeah, so even this is like an average. But actually, like citrus juice is like 98% water. So, dilution is super important to us. Shake too long, over dilution, not good. But here we have what we call existing dilution. So by using freeze concentration, we can get rid of a large part of the water. And so basically we're under diluting what exists. And that means we could shake, stir for longer without over diluting and actually giving the customer a colder cocktail as well. So that's another great use of freeze concentration. And obviously every time you get rid of this again, then all these three are increasing every time. Freeze ripening is another way. It's not a scientific term, but it's one we use freeze concentration for because, in Scotland, say in the winter, we're not gonna get like really good strawberries because it's out of season, so we're gonna get them from Morocco, or like pineapples from Costa Rica as a prime example. Ours look pale. You'd be surprised. They're like white pineapples we get in the UK, And then obviously they don't ripen the way they do it with the chemicals and stuff. But how can we improve off-season imported fruits? We can use freeze concentration. We can mimic ripening, because what's ripening? The reduction of water, increase of sugars and flavor. And here we can do the same with the freeze concentration, and we get more controlled ripeness as well. We can check the bricks, check the pH, and even just with good fruits, and get more consistent ripeness throughout the year. So we know that cocktail is going to be, so even when you get a ripe fruit, it's still going to be different batch by batch, but here we can get more consistent level of how to do this as well. We can make cordials, so we can keep repeating the process. So put this in 4 liters, maybe after 24 hours you skim off like 20%, which is frozen water, put it back in, maybe drop the temperature colder, keep repeating the process, and then you've made a natural cordial because you've got rid of all the water and the natural acids and sugars have increased. But again, it's different to a normal cordial because usually you cook to make the cordials, right? So here we've got this kind of fresh, like alive kind of style cordial. Again, different style, but again, same process. But has anyone heard of this term before? It's another use of freeze concentration. Okay, Scottish people are very weird. We like to create things, but we're not necessarily the best at them. We usually create things for other people to do better than us. So I guess let's go back 100 years. You got like maybe, a whiskey distillery, and you age the barrels. And unlike here, when the hot climates, every year here, generally the ABV will increase. But in a cold climate, the ABV decreases over time. After a little spike, it starts to decrease. So obviously, you need to be 40% to be classified as whiskey. And what happens when it drops below? So maybe it's after like 30 years. it goes to like 39.5%. It still tastes delicious, but it's no longer classified as Scotch. And we don't want to get rid of it because, you know, it still tastes delicious. You know, we're Scottish, we don't want to throw things away. So we put it at the back of the warehouse. 80, 90 years later, electricity's come along. This distiller's long, 6 feet under the ground. And then another weird Scottish guy's like, oh, why don't we get a metal rod that is a freezer, the cold finger, and then we can put it in the cask. And then what happens here, they're capturing the water by freezing it, taking it out, and then by reducing the water, the ABV goes back up. And then it goes back above 40%. They're resurrecting these zombie casks. And that, to be honest, it's not all of them, but it's near impossible for, like, you see these 100-year-old whiskies coming on the market, and they're using this technique. It's not nothing illegal, but it ruins the whole image of us with our kilts running down the mountain with Loch Ness Monster, you know, like just ramming this thing into the thing. It's not, oh, let's charge you £600,000 for those bottles. It doesn't really work. But the more we went into freeze concentration, the more we were trying to learn. So another one we tried doing is like learning about Eisbock, so German beer. And traditionally they'd leave outside. In the winter, froze a little bit, and then you get more voluminous. Because also what's increasing is also the texture as well. Texture, you know, ABV, flavor, but then also like Applejack. So Applejack actually historically was freeze concentration. They had cider outside, again, skimming the frozen part. And that actually was #1 spirit in the US, but because it was unpredictable weather, that's why bourbon was easily surpassed it. They don't use this technique anymore, but I was practicing these, again, learned theory, then I was really practically learning them. Then that's why I realized, like, you know, we're able to freeze out flavor from freeze concentration, and that's what switching was. I was like, well, if I can switch something out, why can't I switch something else back in? So basically, like, switching is just an evolution of freeze concentration, taking that one step further. And it wasn't even us looking to find switching. That was just like a light bulb moment when we were just practicing techniques that existed. So definitely one of those things is a good example of just try loads of things. And then one day you'll just be like, oh, cool. Again, like, you know, Patrón Silver, you know, again, no additives. So it's weird to think that most of it is water, you know? So again, here we have majority water. Again, we can freeze concentrate this. Okay, this time we'll need a special freezer, okay? Because like 40 goes to -27 centigrades. And then sometimes fluctuation in your thermostats in the freezer means you have to maybe do a bit colder. So actually, for us, even though this would be -27 on paper, we have to do -31 in our freezers because we find the temperature is always doing this, kicking up. So, but yeah, again, so even before we've not even wanting to do any switching, we could get rid of the water. Say you want to do kind of maybe tequila style martini like you had last night, Kate. But here we can then do it and stir it for longer and then get it the coldest version of that as well. So even without switching it, we can get things to be even super colder. And maybe even tasting a bit like the 55% if we blended those together. So yeah, it'll be interesting because again, you're taking a little bit of flavors out, but also amplifying some flavors as well. Yeah, so this is the way we kind of do it. Again, as you've seen, the cool boxes, but we always weigh it. You know, I'm sure most of us know this is because, you know, we have a South American rum, Patrón Silver, 700 mils is not going to be the same weight. So we always do it by weight, and we also do it in smaller cool boxes. We can sometimes do 2-liter ones as well, but, you know, actually, even for us, we're still learning. And, you know, initially we're like, let's do a big cool box. Yeah, sure, it's going to be volume. But actually, if you do a huge, like 40, 60-liter cool box, it's going to take so long to freeze. So, yeah, exactly, it's just massive. So it's actually better to do this, and then we added some racks into our super freezer. Yeah, and if you're ever looking at super freezer, just Google ultra low freezer. That's what they're called. Ultra low. And you can get really expensive ones that are like more for like science labs, but we just use the chest freezer style ones.
Which temperature it moves?
It goes to -45.
-45.
Yeah, but I think the good thing as well, like people are always thinking like, oh, I need a new freezer, an extra freezer. I know space is a real luxury for us. But yeah, usually after about 36 hours, 46 hours, then it kind of freezes. But you don't imagine it like the juice here. Alcohol freezes differently. So it won't be like a frozen block on the top. It'll be more like broken glass, granita style. So actually the cleaner, like I think this is a great example of Patrón Silver actually, because there's no additives. The cleaner the spirit, the more broken glass it looks. And actually when the more additives are added, glycerins, sugars, it becomes more like slushy. So actually we didn't realize it, but the more we've done it, we started realizing the quality of the spirits we're using. And actually there's some rums we've not been able to freeze. But yeah, so then what we do is, But then we want to freeze it, we want to separate the frozen to the liquid in the freezer so it doesn't melt when you're outside. And then we like to weigh it. We also like to measure the ABV, because usually you say it's 40%. After this will be about 49, 50%. And then what we like to do is then switch it back to the original. So then people can try the original Patrón Silver with the switched version and can do that better, more accurate comparison of it. Then you can batch it in. We're learning, we make mistakes. We used to batch once a week doing this process, but the alcohol burns off a lot of the kind of delicate flavors, say you're doing clarified pineapple. But this part takes you minutes. So the good thing is you can do all this, the 46-hour process in the background and have it ready. And then every day just, weigh it, measure in, so then you can have it fresh per shift. So yeah, this takes minutes, but you can do all this part the longest and have it ready. And you can even keep it in the freezer. It's not going to freeze anymore, or have it in vac bags in your fridges or whatever as well. And this is a cool analogy as well, because I love when artists, write articles. They're not bartenders. They have to read the theory of it and actually try and visualize it. And I thought this artist did a really good example of it. A, I love Lego, but B, it's showing how we can, again, with freezing, change the building blocks of the flavor. Let me explain. So, for example, Boilermaker, bartender's favorite friend. But here we can freeze the water out of the whiskey, and then we can add in the beer and make a kind of Boilermaker style old-fashioned. Or Jungle Birds, like lots of tropical style drinks, loads of juice, great, fun, but lots of dilution. But here we can do a Jungle Bird by taking the water out of the rum, add the pineapple juice, maybe clarified pineapple juice instead. So it's a lot more spirit forward. So it's more a Negroni style Jungle Bird. So on the menu, it will read exactly the same, but the outcomes are completely different. Then the coconut daiquiri, a main staple in our menu. Here also we can add texture into it. So I guess like a milk punch, but without the over dilution. We're still maintaining the strong ABV of it as well. But yeah, again, it's like we're still like we've got past the mocking phase where people didn't really take what we're doing seriously. Now we're getting to the point where people are like going, actually, this is pretty cool. But yeah, that's it. We can be the first to make a switched, sidecar, Eduardo, and do this and all this stuff. So it gives us more license to be the first doing things as well. But yeah, so going on to that, obviously that was not intentional to do a freezing technique. But then we're like, okay, could be bigger than we expected. Why can't we then look at heat techniques and try and create an alternative using freezing? So the first thing we looked to was a dehydrator. And we're like, okay, what is the goal of a dehydrator? To get rid of all the water so we can store it, use it for garnishes. So then we researched and then we stumbled upon freeze drying. Same thing, getting rid of all the water but using freezing. But again, same goals, completely different outcomes. Lyophilization, thankfully, is not known as that. Horrible word. But yeah, so Harvest Right is the brand we use. Super easy to use as well. And basically what happens here is basically like a glorified freezer. This can go really cold as well, like to -30, -35. And then you obviously got your trays, just like a dehydrator. And then once the door is closed, it becomes a vacuum. And then you've got your vacuum pump here. And then above each tray, you've got these heat pads. So it's always frozen, but when the heat pads turn on sporadically, it creates condensation, just like steaming up in the mirror when you have a shower. And then when that happens, the vacuum pump extracts the moisture. Keeps repeating this until all the moisture is taken out. So it keeps the cell structure intact. So actually, unlike dehydrating with the heat, it breaks it down. You can't just add water to dehydrated orange and expect it to do anything apart from going moldy. But here we can rehydrate, not 100%, but about 70% back, which is pretty cool as well. But yeah, for us as well, actually, the good thing about these techniques is we struggled. The reason why we don't do all these other techniques is because we're so high volume. 120, 140 capacity, usually on average. Weekends, 90, 95% capacity. Weekdays, 70 to 80%. So we're always busy. So we had to develop techniques that we could supply and demand. But yeah, so this is it. So it's reversible. We can also keep seasonal. And I think a lot of people will go like, well, I can just buy freeze-dried products. You can, but there's two big issues here. A, they're super expensive. And B, that person making that freeze-dried product to sell to you, they're not using the best quality fruit. It's literally fruit that's about to be thrown in the bin, or the ones that have zero flavor. That's why maybe when you try freeze-dried fruit, you're not that impressed. You're like, this tastes horrible. It's because you're tasting this. But us, we can really have that kind of farm to freeze-dried to glass process where we're choosing the most ripe things, freeze-drying it. Yes, it's not exactly like fresh, but we know when we can use it, it's going to be delicious. And we can have it. And if you store it correctly in these, we can keep it for 30 years. As long as you got the silicone bags, and then, yeah, it's fresh for 30 years as well. 30-year-old citrus juice. Doesn't sound very nice, does it? Doesn't sound really appealing, This is like some like, I don't know, the number one 50 best bar from 2010, who knows? Like it's long gone, excavating it. Doesn't sound very good, but again, like we didn't invent like freeze concentration, we didn't invent, but we didn't learn, we didn't invent freeze drying either. But the more we've done it, the more we've identified more use cases for it. And then this is why we came to this. Because obviously like Saturday night, you're preparing your citrus juice, but maybe a thunderstorm comes and you're not as busy. And then you have to maybe the next day pour away all this lemon or lime juice. So here we're like, okay, is there a way, can it be reversible? Can we use it again? So this is what we do. Rather than throwing it away, we put it in ice cube trays and we store it. And then we put it in the freeze dryer and then it creates a crystal. So like this, it's probably about 4 liters, maybe 5 liters of lemon juice. And again, we can keep it for 30 years. It's not going to replace a daiquiri. You need fresh lime, sours. You need, when it's a massive component like that, of course, you need it. But if things maybe need 5, 10, maybe 15 mils or sprinkle, this works perfectly for this. We're always going to use fresh citrus in our thing because we wanted to do classics as well, but this lends itself to kind of close that loop and not throw things away. But this is kind of how we do it. So I guess, I think maybe we'll try it. Let's just have a little demo of this so you guys can try it. And I'll pass it around as well so you guys can see what it tastes like. But it's, again, super concentrated. So just take a tiny bit and then pass it around. And again, don't eat it if you don't want to because it's sour, but it tastes nice.
I love
But yeah, actually, Kate had a great example. You had a good point about oils. So that's why I'm adding the lemon oils back into it. Yeah.
That's the ratio.
Yeah, and again, it could be a bit different because again, each batch, different ripeness, different countries, it could be different. So you just need to maybe stick to what you like and go, what's the pH, what's the Brix of this, and then maybe stick to that more. Yeah, so like, yeah, you can do this. And then again, like, you can do like we're doing now, or you can just sprinkle it in and shake with it, So
you're adding the oil?
yeah, because like, as Kate mentioned, you do lose it through the freeze drying, so you need to re-add it back in. And actually, it's something I didn't really consider. Again, we thought about this, but we didn't perfect it yet. And then, but then actually it was Marco Maloney from Side Hustle. He was like, it's missing the oil. So I was like, you're totally right. So now, like, from his point, I was like, oh yeah, I didn't really think about that. So it was cool. But yeah, so like, I'm using a normal blender today, but actually usually we use vacuum blenders, which I'll talk about soon, because actually with this, we're adding oxidization. So actually it's accelerating decay, Benjamin Button style. Yeah, exactly. It's not going to be perfect, but yeah, maybe. But yeah, so these are other usages you can do. You could be really horrible to your friend. You can sprinkle it in, add. But again, talking about vacuum blender as well, I'll briefly touch on this. Like again, it's not necessarily freezing, but it's not heat. But because of the no oxidization, you can make really cool things like the Garibaldi. When you have say the Dante Garibaldi, awesome. But by maybe halfway through, it's separated because the bubbles, aeration has lifted the solids to the top. But because there's no bubbles, because there's a vacuum, it stays stable as a consistent sort of liquid from the first sip to the last sip. And again, different textures, but also it keeps a lot more of the vitamins and minerals in there because again, we're not overly heating it and we're not oxidizing it as well. And actually, I found the vacuum blender by chance. I was just on Amazon and this thing just popped up. And they're not too expensive either. We use a brand called BioChef, and they're really cool. They're really cool things to use. And we do this as well because even though it's freeze-dried, anything that's been frozen to then rehydrate will accelerate decay faster than, say, a fresh produce. Just like when you defrost something to cook and you have it, you just have to use it a bit faster. But again, so talking about that, again, storage is not our friend in most bars. So as I said, we'll still need fresh lemons and stuff, but to store that, it's not really us going like, oh, we need to find another new shelf or something like this. We can, yeah. So again, we're not having to worry about space. Yeah, we do. You don't necessarily have to, but we use these ones. So these ones are quite cool. These are reusable ones. So these ones, you can microwave them and it gets rid of all the moisture again, resets it. So yeah, because also we were conscious that Silk wasn't really necessarily good for the environment. So we found ones that we could use over and over again. Okay, guys, we're gonna try some freeze-dried goodies as well. There we go. So we can have a bit of fun with these as well. So like you've got the first one, you got a meringue, the pink and white, and then actually, do you want to pass these around? Thank you so much. And then we got some sweets, and then also we've got some freeze-dried mandarin. So we're gonna have fun with these because actually what we realized by chucking in sweets into the freeze jar, we can manipulate the thickeners, the stabilizers in there, it'd be gelatin, pectin, and because the freeze jar is trying to get rid of the moisture and this thing's binding in, it will create it to puff. So if you look at like the Haribo, for example, thank you so much, Laura. If you look at the Haribo, for example, it's actually, try it guys, it's actually more like chicharrones in texture. But then as it hydrates, just like dilution, you get more flavor coming in and obviously just rehydrating. The meringue as well, this one's awesome. So like, this is just like, so again, we're trying to work out the composition of the thickeners, stabilizers, but this is like a meringue now. But actually, as some sharp-eyed person saw, these are sweets. These are like Scotland's #1 sweets. So I'll let you guys try these as well as a comparison. So yeah, pass those around. That's the black and pink one. Yeah. So again, so you can see the size difference. So yeah, if you see, sorry, I grabbed one. Yeah, look at the size. So the size difference has completely changed as well.
Are those squishies?
Squashies, yeah. Yeah. And I'll pass these around. Well, yeah, so even look at like here, so I look at the difference in size. But yeah, so again, so what are use cases for this? So not just obviously to enjoy, but we can have fun. Again, we're trying to engage with the consumer, fun garnish. Yeah, but then the mandarin. So what we do here is we can also do this as a garnish, yes. But here, because we're getting rid of all the water, we're left with a very concentrated, fresh form of the mandarin. So we use these for infusions. You're going to try one of these drinks tomorrow that I've done the pineapple with. And so we infuse it. Because obviously it's nice to put fresh mandarins in, something, say, the Patrón Silver, Reposado, but you're adding dilution. Like here, we're minimal dilution, just by volume. So actually, we're keeping that really nice flavor of the alcohol, but also having this really punchy flavor from the thing. But yeah, this is kind of how we approach it as well. So once it's freeze-dried, it's kind of loosely like this. So we kind of blend it in, and then we filter it as well. So it's a really straightforward process to achieve as well. Okay, so now we've gone from dehydrator, what's the alternative universe? We've got freeze-drying. But then this is when it came to the point for us. We're like, look, we're under no illusion of the financial barriers of these. Buy a freeze dryer is not cheap. Of course, the super cold freezers, not super expensive, but again, it's still a financial burden. Like you say, you're a budding bartender. Maybe your manager's like, no, we're not going to get this. We have no space. So we really wanted to find a technique that could be more approachable and adoptable. That's not going to cost a lot. And so then we looked at sous vide, because I think that's probably a technique a lot of people use, and we're like, that's one people love. Let's try and find something here. So we kind of stripped that back down to its goals. As we know, the 2 goals, vacuum chamber, get rid of all the air to create that kind of infusion time. And then the second part is the water bath to create the marrying process. So, right, okay, cool. We knew this, but we didn't know how to achieve this. And again, just I was doing loads of random kind of experiments. We call them jigsaw puzzle pieces, because right at the time, you don't know where they're going to fit. But the more you build up these pieces to the puzzle, they make sense later on. Something will fit with a certain jigsaw puzzle. And that's where we came to this. So I was just like, okay, Mexico, you're never going to really experience this problem most part of Mexico. But Scotland, cold countries, in the winter, maybe you go away for the weekend and the water's laid idle in your pipes, it bursts. Because it's freeze expansion, right? I'm sure Canada, yeah, you guys know that more than most, especially Montreal. But well, that's it. So like water, we just see it as liquid, but bursting metal pipes. I was just like, okay, there's something here. I was like, there's something here. I needed to research, near the energy. So then we found the energy was 100,000 psi in terms of that. So don't think about it being fizzy, but that pressure, it's like 2 to 3 times the pressure of us carbonating our cocktails. And I was like, as soon as that's released, the energy is gone. So like, is there a way we can harness this and see what happens? So this is where we came to this. And so that's where we got these kind of kegs. You can use really any metal one, but we used initially 2 liters. We found 5 liters is safe because water expands the most. The more alcohol is in it, the less expansion. And then what we did here is just like a sous vide. We would add the whole cocktail in, but then in this case, maybe it's peaches or herbs, rosemary. We put it and we tighten it really tight, and in this case we freeze it fully. And what happens here is when it freezes, it's expanding, right? But then it's trying to escape. It can't escape because thankfully the stainless steel keg is strong enough, so it goes into the fruit. So it's again kind of mimicking that first part of sous vide, which is the vacuum chamber, because it gets rid of all the air and it goes in, creates the infusion process. And then when it freezes fully, the flavors suspend. And then once it's ready, we defrost it, then they marry together, combine. So again, it's like the water bath. So again, we're researching it. Again, if we did the same cocktail with sous vide and suppression, same goals, but the completely different outcomes. So that's what we're just trying to find is the same goals for this. And what we find here is obviously if you do an old fashioned, it's not going to freeze in an old freezer too high. So we generally follow the kind of like a 50-50 martini formula. Like this is a good example of how we kind of break it down into the cocktail because you don't want the ABV to be too high. But then if it's still not freezing in your normal freezer, you can then pre-dilute it as well, be it 5, 10, 15, 20, whatever percent water you want, that's going to be the perfect for the cocktail. And what we find is so good about this as well is you're always going to deliver that cocktail balance to the customer. It's always going to be the same because it's all the hard work's done behind the scenes. So you're getting slammed just like one pour, boom. So maybe you have to do a quick stir. But yeah, obviously you over pour, your manager's going to be angry at you. Under pour, customer will be a bit angry at you. So that's the only issues. But they're going to get a balanced cocktail every single time. And then for us to keep up with demand, we've got it in different stages. So we've got the one stage where it's the kegs in the freezer. Then we've got ones where it's defrosted, vac bags in the fridge, and then ones that are on bar. So there's always, then there's a couple bottles on the side fridge to the bar. So there's always one step, so we're never running out, and we're always topping up each step as we go along and keeping it fresh. Because obviously things like your sherry's vermouth are not going to be nice forever. So we always make sure we're kind of turning through it in a quick way. And this is kind of the way we approach flavor as well. Again, as I said, we're constantly looking at the heat techniques right now to find alternatives. We find this is the best way for us to really kind of be really organized in how to do it. One thing we're doing right now, it's just another thing I was thinking about was, you touch something really hot, you get a blister. You touch something really cold, you get a blister. Something's there. I was like, there's something there with this. So we've actually got these super cold plates that were developed by Alinea years ago. They kind of flopped and bought them, but they go to like minus 50 degrees. So we're going to try something with these. We know it will make a difference. We're just not sure it's going to make a significant enough difference to utilize it for the menu. So hopefully next year we're going to kind of release that as well. So watch this space. But yeah, so I guess we're talking about successes, everything we do, but you make failures along the way. Sometimes you get a bit too big for your boots. In this case, I did a little bit. I saw this, I guess you may see it a few years ago. This guy got a powdered alcohol license, trademarked, but he never got it to the level where he could sell it. But I was like, I know what he's doing here. He's freeze drying the alcohol. So straight away, I was like, gin, rum, vodka, freeze dryer. And as I said, things take about 9 to 36 hours in the freeze dryer. 7 days later, just still going and still going. And then it just stopped going. And then it died. So don't put alcohol in your freeze dryer. This is not how this person developed powdered alcohol. I still don't know how he's developed powdered alcohol, but it's good. It kept me humble. Keeps your feet on the ground. It's good to have little failures. But also for me, with this, I don't necessarily see them as failures because we're trying things, especially cocktails. Yeah, you're gaining knowledge. I now know that's not how I did it. So I've gained that little bit of knowledge. And that means I'm getting, knowledge is power for me. I think that's what, continuous learning is very important. And that's why I love these things, because you just know you're just getting one step closer to achieving what you want to do. So I think that's really good about failures. I just find them very exciting. And then sometimes, like maybe this one, because it was very expensive, maybe that was a bit upset about this one. Then I watched like Jiro Dreams About Sushi. Has anyone seen this documentary? Unbelievable. Like this really young man in the middle. He's probably about 100 years old now, 3-star Michelin, and he still approaches work thinking, I can be better than the day before. It's not about being negative, like, oh, I'm so bad. Oh, no, he's very proud of his work, but he still turns up going, how do I improve? And that's how we kind of teach the staff, not to get complacent, because I've always been fascinated by, like, why does a good bar not become a good bar anymore? And because when they come out with the doors swinging open, boom, they set a really amazing benchmark, and everyone's blowing smoke up their bums, going, you guys are amazing, which they all credit due. But because they're getting blinded by all this, they set a benchmark which other bars and new bars can aspire to and generally then eclipse. And then before they know it, they're not at the top anymore. So that's why we follow this, because we're constantly looking at what we're doing and going, is this still good? And I think over the nearly 11 years, we've changed our whole bar system 3 times and stuff like this. So again, getting a bit off the beaten track, but it's constantly looking at how you're doing, and you get inspiration from other amazing bars like yourselves and seeing like, oh, that's really cool. Actually, that makes more sense in terms of efficiency, or this, or we develop new technique, we need to change the bar. It's about just seeing the different great minds just pushing each other to do it. So I think next year we're going to do the bar again, just the bar stations a bit. Like I saw your thing, and I'm like, I can't wait to see it.
Wow.
Yeah. But yeah, so watch this. This is my top 2 hangover movies, but also good for inspiration. But yeah, so again, not about ice creams. I talked about the Brain Melting Society. Also, my mum and I taught my mum after I went to all the things. She makes all the ice cream for us, so we've got an ice cream factory in the back of Hoot. But then my sister then got involved. They both fired me, kicked me out of the ice cream factory. Okay. So now it's their domain. Now my mum's taking a slightly back seat, and then my sister kind of oversees everything. So they make it for Hoot and also Panda and Sons. One last failure. So actually, when we first did Senior Scoop, which was our boozy ice cream brand with Hoot, we got given money to do an ice cream van. So we did like a complete thing at Pimp My Ride. You know, this was an 80s Bedford. So, and it was like, we did the whole like new paint job, new wheels. Actually, the Carbugiani soft serve still worked, which was awesome. But we got a new sound system, really cool, big ice cream lights in the front. It looked awesome. But we bought it from a farmer. And what farmers have a good understanding of basic mechanics. They're not going to spend a lot of money. Tape here, maybe a plaster on that bit. Then there you go. So every time we drove this van, something else happened. It was never the same problem. So the first thing was like the water overheated, then the electrics failed, then the engine blew up. But the final straw is I don't drive, so actually I was in the passenger seat, and it's that old that the passenger doesn't have a seatbelt. And then we drove all the way down the motorway for a couple of hours, got back to Edinburgh, literally went onto the red light, stopped, and the wheel fell off. And then that was when I was like, okay, this is it. This is actually, of all the bars and all the things I've done, this has been the most stressful thing I've ever done. Like I had just a little bit of alopecia. Weirdly, it's called Panda alopecia. And I had this big patch here from this. It was so stressful. Yeah, it was weird. But so when I sold it, I didn't want people to think, I wasn't going to con them. So I was very clear on the thing, like, guys, cool ice cream van, but it's very cursed. There's going to be problems when you get it. And it got so much interest. Then actually this year, this was about 8 years ago. But then actually at the beginning of this year, my friend was like, are you selling your ice cream van? I'm like, no, that's long gone away from me. So it's that whoever sold it to is now selling it to someone else. So the curse is continuing in its different form. So if you ever buy an ice cream van, buy a new one. What I've realized is you can make them look old. Just don't buy an old one, and especially not from a farmer.
Of course.
Here's the slides, guys. Again, I know.
Can we?
Okay. Again, I know, absorbing all the information, but yeah, it's good to have this as well. Hopefully, share with your teams. And then, for me, again, it's very important to share knowledge, etc. So, like, hopefully, maybe you guys will want to kind of try stuff, and I'm always available. We're all friends as well. But I want to leave on this quote, because I'm curious about freezing, quite clearly. I'm very passionate about this, but not everyone here is going to be passionate about freezing like I am. But I think we're all here because we're passionate about bartending. And I feel now sometimes there's this peer pressure to buy certain pieces of kit to feel that this is what qualifies you to be a good bar, which I really strongly disagree with. I think you have to really follow your identity. Like, I think if everyone's doing the same thing, it's like, I like a burger, I'm going to go to a burger joint. I don't want to have a burger everywhere I go. And so we need that really differentiation. Maybe you're into fermentation, you're an agave spirits aficionado, you want to do really kind of classic elevated style, blah, blah, blah. Like we all have to have a different unique styles. Like a Japanese cuisine, there's got like teppanyaki, ramen, sushi. Like we all need to have more of an identity. I think also touching on techniques, but I think also people need to start being more and more, and you are seeing it. There's some really great bartenders and bars out there like yourselves, but we need to see more of this and less peer pressure into thinking you need to have a tick box in terms of that, because it's what you're passionate about means you're going to do so well at that and pursue it. So follow what you're curious about, everyone. And yeah, that's it. Thank you.